The time for silence is over. Roy apparently wants to talk about Joe Biden being a racist. Roy, you're on the air. You may want to mute the stream in the background and just listen on the phone. I'm getting some feedback.
Yeah, not a worry.
So what'd you have to say, Roy?
So how can you ignore Joe Biden's history of racism? He was there during the Southern strategy in Congress. He was pivotal to the 94 crime bill and mass incarcerations. He backed the war on drugs. Simply his words. Poor kids are as bright as white kids. Asking a black reporter, are you a junkie, when he was asked if he's had a cognitive test. If that had been Trump, he would have been ripped to shreds. Trump asked a black reporter to set up a meeting with the Black Caucus as a joke. How's this double standard okay?
Over how many years did Joe Biden make his statements?
Over 46 years, he's made statements.
Okay.
Going as recently as last April.
What was the one last April?
He was asked if he had taken a cognitive test, and he replied, are you a coke addict?
And that's racist to you?
He replied to a black reporter. Like I said, if Trump had given that same response, he would have been ripped to shreds. He simply asked one to set up a meeting with the Black Caucus for him.
Okay, so let's pretend for a minute that Joe Biden's views over 46 years have not gotten better. Okay? So I'm just going to grant you that tentatively for right now. Has Joe Biden ever called people at a neo-Nazi protest very fine people?
No, but he has defended Republicans in Congress who have.
Has Joe Biden ever personally called neo-Nazis very fine people?
Not to my knowledge.
Has Joe Biden ever been unable to condemn white supremacy or white nationalism?
Yes, in the 90s.
In the 90s, he was directly asked to condemn white supremacy and white nationalism, and he failed to do so.
During the crime bill, he was asked if it had white supremacist roots, and he said no, that it had no impact. That would be racially disproportionate.
Okay, so he was not directly asked if he could condemn white supremacy and white nationalism.
Okay, I'll go with that. We can go by the letter of what you're saying.
Okay. Has Joe Biden ever told a white supremacist / fascist organization to stand back and stand by in case the election didn't go his way?
Just because Trump is worse than Biden doesn't make Biden not guilty of the same types of crime or the same types of racism.
Okay, so now your position seems to have shifted.
It's a false equivalency.
It's not, but we're getting there. Okay, so by your own admission, I think I heard, but clarify for me, that Trump was worse on race issues than Biden. Did I hear you correctly?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Trump is worse. We agree on that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no question about that.
So who were my viable choices for president?
Just because you don't have a choice doesn't mean don't have a good choice doesn't mean you don't have a choice, I guess. But the point is, I didn't come in and say Biden should have beaten Trump. I came in and said that Biden has his own racial baggage that he has to deal with. That giving him a pass on it isn't fair.
I don't know that I've ever given him a pass on it, and I don't know that I would disagree that Biden has some racial baggage. But by your own admission, Trump's was worse by far, I would say, but I am adding the by far because I'm not trying to misrepresent you. And then my choices were either Biden or Trump. Can you agree with that statement?
Vote. No, or you could protest vote.
I could protest vote. Would that vote have been viable? Is there a chance my candidate would have won?
No, but there's a chance that you could have brought about real change. Are you ready to go off rails a little bit?
A little bit, but let's stick to this for a couple more sentences. So if my candidate could not have won, How could I have brought about real change?
How do you think that Trump came about?
I think he co-opted the Republican.
Got 12 point,
I think
the Tea Party got 12.4% of the vote in 2012.
Yeah.
The Republicans adopted the Tea Party along with the entire Southern strategy. And here we are.
So the Tea Party, in my view, co-opted the Republican Party from within. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Okay, so I'm trying to do the same thing
that's because,
from the progressive side with the Democratic Party, because the Tea Party never stood a chance independently of electing a president.
But the Tea Party still managed to get 12.4% of the popular vote, and the Republicans gobbled up their platform faster than a hungry hippo.
I would agree. They co-opted the Republican Party. Give me just a second. Conundrum, Mr. Trump told them to stand back and stand by. He did not specifically tell them to stand down. You are incorrect. You need to go back and look at the quote. The next day, when he was interviewed in front of his limousine, I forget exactly where it was, then he said that he was basically, and I'm not going to quote directly here, not familiar with the Proud Boys at the time, and they needed to stand down. So he corrected it the next day. However, in a national televised debate, you reach a much larger audience. Stand back and stand by is not remotely the same thing as stand back and stand down. As a former military officer, if I tell my soldiers to stand down, that is one thing. If I tell them to stand by, that is something entirely different. Sorry for the interruption, Roy.
No problem at all. Now, to go back to your choices, Jill Stein was a viable choice, and if she had gotten that same 12.4% of the vote, we'd be seeing an eruption inside of the Democratic Party right now, I believe.
Did Jill Stein win a single state?
Neither did the Tea Party in 2012.
Okay, so neither one of them were viable and both function from within the party, which is what I'm advocating for. The progressives in the Democratic Party have gotten elected. AOC's, Bernie Sanders, the Squad. I can point to multiple election victories that are better on race, I would agree with you, than Joe Biden. But starting a third party movement and throwing away a vote, which would, by your own admission, not have accomplished anything this term, and allowing somebody who is a much worse racist, again, even if I concede your Joe Biden has race issues point, seems like a very bad decision to me.
If we didn't have the Electoral College, you and I would agree on this point. The Electoral College in your state, your vote doesn't matter anyways. You're going to go New Mexico. That's Republican, right?
I'm in Nevada, but yeah. New Mexico actually voted Democrat, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. But the point is, for 80% of the country, our vote doesn't count unless we do something such as a protest vote for a third party. And that's where these parties get their realignment. They start looking to third party momentum for what platforms are going to be next.
I would argue that parties get their realignments from primaries, because that's when the Tea Party started making a massive impact, is when they started running in Republican primaries and primarying the old neoconservative, neoliberal politicians and getting the populist instead. And again, that's what I'm advocating for in the Democratic Party.
With a third party and needed support.
It started out with a non-viable third party, and it learned and grew. I'm advocating for skipping the first step and starting with what worked. I agree with you. The Electoral College should go away, but that's not the system I was working with this election, unfortunately.
Well, keep doing what you're doing, man. It's brave to bring up the Southern strategy. I like that.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you much. And it's an important part of our history that we need to be aware of, in my opinion.
Yep, absolutely. Take care.
You too. Thank you for the call. Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition,